In every revolution, there's one man with a vision.
You can't handle the truth.
And welcome, folks. This is Truth versus News, and it's July 15th, right in the middle of the month, and right in the middle of all kinds of action here. And I'm just absolutely thrilled, for one thing, because I got my copies of Jim Fetcher's banned books here. All, and the 6 banned books is really quite good. And I will say, just reading the back covers of these just makes it worth it. These are something that will be a collector's item that is going to be worth a lot, especially in the material that's in here. You can't get this anywhere else, and it's just wonderful. So with that plug, I'm just going to say that we're going to continue on with the hot news of the day here. The most dangerous man in America, who's being, for an old guy, he's the most, I don't know how you can be so deadly to you, but you're deadly accurate. And Scott Bennett is a superstar who has really uncovered a lot of stuff about a guy named Epstein and others back when. So this should be a very interesting show. So I guess I'll just get out of the way and say, carry on, Jim.
You got it, Don. Indeed. The president has made what I initially believed to have been a blunder. This is all preliminary to the main story of the day about Jeffrey Epstein. By telling these 4 freshman congresswomen to go back to the countries they came from. These are the 4 progressive women of color that have become so prominent in the Democratic Party. But he committed a blunder because only one of them was not born in the USA. Wrapped inside that insult widely established as a racist trope was a factually inaccurate claim. Only one of the lawmakers was born outside the country. Though Trump has repeatedly refused to back down from stoking racial divisions, his willingness to deploy a low-rung slur was largely regarded as beyond the pale. Interesting to see progressive Democrat congresswomen who originally came from countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe, the worst, most corrupt and inept anywhere in the world. As I say, I thought this was quite a blunder on the part of Trump. On the other hand, I've discovered polling that suggests these are very unpopular political figures. I think that the president made a morally wrong decision here, but it may be that he won't suffer any political consequences. A new internal Democrat poll in swing districts released Sunday showed that socialist representatives Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar are extremely unpopular and may even cost the Democratic Party the presidency in the House in 2020. Ocasio-Cortez was recognized by 74% of voters in the poll. 22% had a favorable view. Another member of the squad, Ilhan Omar, Minnesota, was recognized by 53% of the voters. Only 9% had a favorable view.
9%.
9%. Socialism was viewed favorably by just 18%, unfavorably by 69%. Capitalism was 56% favorable, 32% unfavorable. The firm conducted the poll, gave the results on the condition it not be named because it works with all parts of the party. A top Democrat involved in the 2020 congressional race said if all voters hear about is AOC, it could put the House majority at risk. She's getting all the news and defining everyone else's races. Socialism is toxic to these voters. The other issue where I worry that Trump is on thin ice is in relation to Iran. Iran is ready to hold talks with the U.S. if Washington lifts sanctions and returns to the 2015 nuclear deal it quit last year, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said in a televised speech Sunday. President Trump says it's open to negotiation with Iran on a more far-reaching agreement on nuclear and security issues, but Iran has made any talks conditional on first being able to export as much oil as it did before the U.S. withdrew from the nuclear pact. We believe the time has come to act responsibly and look for ways to stop the escalation of tension and resume dialogue, they said in a joint statement that was released by the French president's office. In spite of calling for talks with Iranian leaders, Trump said U.S. sanctions on Iran would soon be increased substantially. In reaction to U.S. sanctions, which have notably targeted Iran's main foreign stream in the production of crude oil exports, Tehran announced in May it would scale back its commitments under the deal, defying a warning by the European parties to the pact who want to continue full compliance. Tehran has amassed more low-enriched uranium than permitted, has started to enrich uranium above the 3.67 permitted by the agreement. The risks are such it's necessary for all stakeholders to pause and consider the possible consequences of their action. France, Britain, and Germany have been trying to salvage the pact by shielding Tehran's economy from sanctions, said in their statement. I believe that Tehran is actually acting responsibly, Scott, when you consider that the U.S. is not upholding its part of the bargain. Why should Iran? Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, that's right. Iran is not Saudi Arabia. It's not the United Arab Emirates. It's not these Wahhabi, Salafist, Bedouin tribes. It is Persia. It is an ancient culture that goes back thousands and thousands of years. You're going back to ancient biblical times. You have a large constituency of Jews living in Iran and, in fact, occupying positions in the government in Iran. You have Christians living in Iran. I was in Iran last year, and I found them very, very mild and hospitable and gentle people, very, very dignified, very, very quiet-spirited. I never saw any of the emotional tirades or schizophrenia or maniacy that is rampant in the Gulf countries. So Iran was always a peculiar anathema, if you will, to the American neocon warmongering establishment. They're more in tune with the American people, and for that reason, I always say Iran represents a better ally and investment and social collaborator than Saudi Arabia or any of these other countries, because they're just a better quality of people and culture. So I think Trump needs to really recognize that his best and only option is to remove his foreign policy team and establish people like Senator Dick Black, General Michael Flynn, Tulsi Gabbard, others who are of a pro-peace, a pro-mutual collaboration impulse, and use them and put them in power before 2020, so he can communicate to the American public that he has not abandoned his first love, he's not abandoned peace, he's not abandoned his original promises to pull the United States out of the Middle East wars. He's actively engaging Iran on a positive, productive level, and he would find them listening and in fact obedient to a lot of the impulses. But it's the United States errors and controversies and hypocrisies that have put us in this position, from Libya, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Victoria Nuland, and John Kerry, and this cast of criminals overthrew Libya, stole billions of dollars, killed millions of people. Sarkozy and Cameron did this too. Then they also went up and tried to overthrow Ukraine, and that was another Victoria Nuland, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton episode. And then they went to Libya or Syria and tried to overthrow Syria, and John Kerry with the chemical weapons. So we've set these fires across the Middle East, and now Trump has an opportunity to put them out, like he was voted to put them out. And he needs to do that because everybody is pissed off at Libya for what we did to them. They're pissed off at Ukraine, and they're pissed off about Syria because there's no investment there. There's no value to the American public. And Trump is in between a rock and a hard place, it seems, but he needs to just extradite himself and get out of that and say, look, we have no business overthrowing Libya. It was a total war crime. These people should be prosecuted for it. Ukraine was a war crime. You're doing a coup d'etat. You're not getting away with this stuff anymore. In the days of the internet, you're not getting away with it. Yeah, Facebook and Twitter and YouTube may try and shut it down, but they're ultimately going to be shut down in lawsuits and things like that. The American people are smarter than that. And with Iran, Iran is the real rubber meeting the road, because they are the power broker in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia could fall apart at any day, and in that case, you have a very big potential civil war situation. Russia and China and Iran standing together represents a strong voting bloc. So Trump needs to really recognize that. And getting back to finishing up with the Ocasio-Cortez and the Ilhan Omar, I agree with you, Jim. It is a diplomatic communication blunder. Trump needs to not do that. He can't make the victims, he can't make these Skigsian witches, these lunatics that are up there saying open borders, there's no America, bring in every banana republic person from all over the South, Central America, South America. You know, those people who want that are lunatics and are in violation of the Constitution. However, Trump is the president of the United States. He can't allow himself to lower himself to their level and engage in personal insults, especially when they're women, because they can say, look at me, woe is me. I'm just a little woman out here trying to be a congresswoman to help America. And this big, bad, blustery Trump is pounding me like a hammer. Vote for me if you want to, save little women in America. That's how the political communication can evolve, and it can put Trump on defense. So he needs to be very, very cautious. He can say things like, these people who criticize America have no legs to stand on, and they represent open borders and chaos and everything that you stand against. But he's got to be very careful not to allow them to spin this into a racial, sexual, a misogynistic thing, because the left and the TVs and the media are all going to, pop up on that. It's early enough that this will go away and it won't come back up in 2020, but he's got to be real careful, because he can't afford to allow the propaganda to ignite and become a potential inferno. We're in a dry season in a lot of ways, and we've got to be careful not to kick things off like that, Jim.
Excellent comments. And the fact that they're women of color, Scott, complicates the situation. Now, you know that the situation is dire for Democrats when you have Nancy Pelosi's daughter saying it's quite likely some of our faves are going to be implicated in the Epstein case. Warning, some of the Democrats' favorites are going to turn out to be involved in a pedophile scandal. Meanwhile, we have him going to court. We have his Wikipedia page being stealth edited to remove ties to Democrats. This is fascinating. They're leaving up ties to Donald Trump, but not to Democrats. In the wake of Jeffrey Epstein's weekend arrest, an observant Twitter user noticed someone had edited the billionaire pedophile's wiki page to remove all mention of Democrats who have flown on the Lolita Express. On Sunday, the sentence Epstein flew Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, and Chris Tucker to Africa on his private jet, where flight records show Bill Clinton flew on Epstein's plane 26 times, a charge Bill Clinton has denied, claiming it was only 4, but all the evidence is against it. A reference to having attended parties with Donald Trump was left untouched. And as Steve Straub of the Federalist Papers points out, this comes after Christine Pelosi, daughter of Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, and a top official with the DNC sounded the alarm over the weekend arrest of Jeffrey Epstein on sex trafficking charging, speculating that some of our faves may be indicted in the wake of Epstein's arrest. Fascinating. Epstein was hauled into court Monday after his Saturday arrest, where prosecutors revealed they found nude photos of underage girls during a raid on his Manhattan home. He's pled not guilty, but his attorneys have argued he has immunity under a 2008 plea agreement where he admitted to procuring a person under 18 for prosecution and felony solicitation of prosecution, serving just 13 months in a Florida state prison after cutting a sweetheart deal with current Labor Secretary and then U.S. Attorney-elect Acosta. And that was a particularly good deal because 5 days of the week, all the work days, he was let out of prison to go to his own office to do his thing. Meanwhile, it's an uncomfortable reality. An expert on how Epstein's case isn't all that unique. The 14-page indictment alleged Epstein paid girls for massages that then became sexual acts, then would use them to recruit new victims. The Epstein's case is unique in terms of media attention. The issue of child sex trafficking is far more reaching. In 2017, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children estimated 1 in 7 runaways reported their organization were likely sex trafficking victims. The total number is estimated in the hundreds of thousands. Yasmin Yaffa, Executive Director of Rights for Girls, dedicated to ending gender-based violence against young women and girls, spoke with Mother Jones about the broader issue of sex trafficking. How do these girls end up being trafficked? Unsurprising to us, the vast majority are Black and brown, including gender nonconforming youth and LGBT youth, some of the most vulnerable children in our society. From the work we've done, we know many, if not most, have childhood histories of sexual and physical abuse. Many have experienced some type of involvement with child welfare. Many have come in contact with the juvenile justice system. Why do you think child sex trafficking doesn't get that much attention? It's a lot easier to think this is hyperbole and exaggerated. It's an uncomfortable reality, I think, first of all. It's one of those issues largely hidden in plain sight. People often don't recognize the signs or what they're seeing around them. Oftentimes gets mistaken for adult prostitution. People play it off as a victimless crime. Do you think the race and economic status of these girls matters? Absolutely. When you look at the vast majority of children who are impacted by sex trafficking and sexual exploitation, they are people of color. In places where even the percentage of people of color is very low, they are overrepresented. When you're looking like at King County, Washington, Blacks are only 7% of the general population, but 52% of child sex trafficking victims. Scott.
Well, that's right here in Seattle and King County. We got a problem here. The city of Seattle is dying, and it really is all kinds of different ways. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, well, I mean, I believe in execution in the most painful way the imagination can create for these sex traffickers. I believe drawing and quartering them and doing it the old-fashioned way. Death is a gift to these people who traffic in children, and I think all of this is consistent and harmonious with the impulses of the American people. There's nothing more outrageous and disgusting about sex trafficking and this whole thing. There's no greater crime. So I think people are going to virulently and with great outrage respond to the revelations of Bill Clinton, who everyone knew is a philanderer and a rapist and a criminal and a narcissist. But when it comes to this sort of level of transparency and actual legal prosecution and the submission of evidence and testimony and the evidence and testimony of the pilot of the plane, and mind you, they will do that. They will indict the road mechanics, the guys who blow up the tires. They will indict as co-conspirators and say, you need to give us some information to talk about this, or else. So, you know, this really can empty out the entire pockets and the content of the black book that Epstein used to utilize. Now, there is an interesting development in this, Jim, and that is Acosta. And if you want me to get into it later, I can. But if you want me to get into it later?
I mean, about Acosta having resigned. Yeah. We got that coming, Scott.
Okay, I'll defer to that then. Go ahead, Jim.
It's coming right up. Here it is. Bombshell: Acosta reportedly claimed Jeffrey Epstein belonged to intelligence. To appreciate the significance of what I'm about to share, this comes from Mike Krieger. You really need to go back and read yesterday's post. The Jeffrey Epstein rabbit hole goes a lot deeper than you think. In that place, I shared many lesser known but extremely bizarre facts about Epstein and the people around him. I noticed it appeared his real job was to run a blackmail operation to ensnare some of the most wealthy and powerful people on earth. I alluded to the possibility he was collecting this priceless information on behalf of a third party. And then just today, we learned the following from the Daily Beast. Is the Epstein case going to cause a problem for confirmation hearings? Acosta had been asked. He explained breezily he'd just been in one meeting on the Epstein case. He cut the non-prosecution deal with one of Epstein's attorneys because he'd been told to back off, that Epstein was above his pay grade. I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. He told his interviewers in the Trump transition, who evidently thought that was a sufficient answer, and went ahead and hired him. For almost 2 decades, for nebulous reasons, whether to do with ties to foreign intelligence, his billions of dollars, or his social connections, Epstein, whose alleged sexual sickness and horrific assaults on women without means or ability to protect themselves is well known in his circle, remained untouchable. It should be noted the reason I attach credibility to the above is based on who wrote it, Vicky Ward. She has an extensive history of digging into Epstein, wrote one of the earliest profiles on him back in 2003. As she noted in today's article, I spent many months on his trial in 2002 for Vanity Fair, discovered not only that he was not who he claimed to be professionally, but that he had allegedly assaulted 2 young sisters, one of whom had been underage at the time. Very bravely, they were prepared to go on record. They were afraid he'd use his influence to discredit them, and their fear turned out to be legitimate. As the article was being readied for publication, Epstein made a visit to the office of Vanity Fair's then editor, Graydon Carter, and suddenly the women and their allegations were removed from the article. He's sensitive about the young women, Carter told me at the time. He also mentioned he'd finagled a photograph of Epstein in a swimsuit out of the encounter, as though that were a big deal. And there was also some feeble excuse about the article being stronger as a business story. Epstein also leaned heavily on my ex-husband's uncle, Conrad Black, to try to exert his influence on me, which was particularly unwelcome, given that Black happened to be my ex-husband's boss at the time. Many people had assumed Epstein was untouchable merely because he had so much dirt on so many powerful people. But it increasingly looks far bigger than that. It appears he may have been untouchable because he was systematically collecting this information on behalf of an intelligence agency. If so, we need to find out precisely who he was working for. Meanwhile, Acosta resigns over the 2008 Epstein plea deal controversy. A tweet from the president. Alex Acosta informed me this morning he felt the constant drumbeat of press about a prosecution that took place under his watch more than 12 years ago was bad for the administration, which he so strongly believes in, and he graciously tendered his resignation. Labor Secretary Acosta announced his resignation Friday after receiving harsh criticism for his role in brokering a 2008 deal with registered sex offender and pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. He'll be replaced by Deputy Labor Secretary Patrick Pizzella. Acosta held a press conference Wednesday in which he suggested Epstein's deal was the fault of Florida state prosecutors, or possibly the judge or anyone else but him, and that Epstein would have walked free without the deal he was behind. I wanted to help them, Mr. Acosta, who was the top federal prosecutor in Miami then, said of the victims during an hour-long session with reporters at the Labor Department. That is why we intervened. And that's what the prosecutors of my office did. They insisted that he go to jail and put the world on notice he was and is a sexual predator. Meanwhile, Ann Coulter thinks Epstein had a state sponsor and was running a blackmail operation. Right. She's very perceptive in her observation and is willing to go where many are not. Conservative commentator Ann Coulter said sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein had a state sponsor backing him and that his operation was a way to blackmail powerful men. During an appearance on 790 ABC, Coulter suggested Epstein is merely the front man for a far more powerful network. Epstein, according to both the girls' accounts, wanted them to have sex with powerful men, come back to him and report on it, describe what they wanted, what their fetishes were, and had cameras throughout the house. So this was obviously for blackmailing purposes, said Coulter. It just seems to me something much bigger is behind this, perhaps a state sponsor, powerful enough people. It seems to me there's something, a very powerful force behind what's going on here. I'm still nervous about this not coming to a conclusion, somehow this getting compromised. Coulter said it remained a mystery as to how Epstein became a billionaire, and that the source of his money should be investigated. Former President Bill Clinton attempted to distance himself from Epstein last night, claiming he only flew on the infamous Lolita Express private jet 4 times, despite flight logs showing at least 26 trips. As we reported yesterday, speculation is swirling that Epstein may give up names of influential people who used his network in order to secure a maximum prison sentence of no more than 5 years. So is a cartoon suggesting what may be going on here? Roses are red, violets are blue. Start a war with Iran or Epstein fingers you from Bibi Netanyahu. Now, Scott, I'm particularly eager to get your reaction to the observations of Steve Pieczenik, which I think it takes. This is maybe the most important 7 minutes we've ever broadcast on this show. Listen to every single word.
Very good.
Hi, this is Dr. Pieczenik. I want to talk about the Epstein pedophilia ring. What it really is a Mossad Israeli operative ring, which goes back decades and decades, all the way to the time even where the Liberty ship was attacked by Israeli planes, unmarked Israeli planes during the 6-day war, and Israel said they didn't do it. Well, that was a lie. Israel has not been our greatest ally. It's been our greatest enemy. They were also involved in 9/11 and the standout, for which this deputy confirmed that to me. Israeli Mossad operatives who I interrogated and threatened confirmed that to me, and I put away 2 Mossad operatives. The key to this Epstein problem of pedophilia is the fact that it goes back decades. Jeff Epstein was picked out by the Mossad as the proper agent of influence because, number one, he was grandiose. 2, he had some intelligence, but came from a poor Jewish background, had no real education, did not speak a foreign language, and was so narcissistic that they could manipulate him up and down and create a false front for him, which involved the fact that he had multi-million dollars or multi-billion dollars. He may have no money. It's not even relevant. But to make sure that Jeffrey Epstein was working properly, they had an operative from the Mossad who was named Maxwell, the daughter of Robert Maxwell, one of the greatest crooks in the world, who was an Israeli Mossad operative. When he died in 1991, he was either killed or he died. He was one of the biggest contributors to Israeli national security of anybody else. So his daughter was the control operative of Jeff Epstein. At the same time, we had Nexium in New York City, which was run by a non-Jew named Renier, but controlled by 2 Jewish women, the Bronfman family. And they, in turn, were propagating pedophilia. Now, why is pedophilia so lethal? From an intelligence point of view, from my point of view, as an intelligence operative and a counterintelligence operative, one of the most disgusting things that you can do in the intelligence world is to double you up or co-opt you through the use of a honey trap, but not only an adult honey trap, but a child. When you use a child, you pretty much terrorize that child so that you know anybody who's gotten involved with pedophilia cannot speak out, the child can't say anything, and it's a legitimate way to denigrate both the operative and the problem itself, the children. Nevertheless, the Mossad incurred so many operatives that were involved with pedophilia under the Epstein ring and under the Nexium ring with the 2 Bronfman daughters, that you're talking about thousands of people. Now, it also goes all the way up into the presidency. It goes into the Bush family, Bush Jr., Jeb. It goes into Clinton's, as we know, Hillary, Bill Clinton, who's a pathological liar to the nth degree, to Obama, who had a history of homosexuality and pedophilia, all the way down to the Bushes and beyond that. So what the Israelis did under the tutelage of 2 brilliant Mossad chiefs, Halevi and Yatom, both of whom used pedophilia as a honey trap to encapsulate any one of our operatives in America. Jeff Epstein was a willing operative. He willingly was involved in pedophilia. The Israelis knew that. They created his storyline. They made believe he was a billionaire. Wexner was the theoretical backup man to him, and ironically, he was in Bear Stearns, which was another corrupt Jewish firm that went under, along with Drexel Burnham, another corrupt Jewish firm. So we have a lot of corruption here, which goes all the way back to 9/11, when we had Jews like Silverstein, who had the lease to the World Trade Center. We had Lowry, we had Lauder, and we had Eisenberg, all of whom were involved in the stand down and the false flag of 9/11. So from 9/11 on, Trump understood that the Israelis had been involved in our intelligence service and in compromising America. He never forgot that. And what he did blatantly was to turn around, and on a certain day, he decided he was going to indict every one of the Mossad operatives, as well as the Israelis, on charges of pedophilia. Not on charges of spying, because that wouldn't work. But Acosta, the Secretary of Labor, was correct when he said that Epstein got off of the prosecutor's indictment in Florida because he worked in the intelligence service. Now, it's not only the Mossad that's involved, clearly the CIA was involved. And it was the old CIA and not the present CIA. Why do I say that? Because the heroes of this picture is not only Trump and the White House, but it really involves what I consider to be my deep state, which is what I've talked about for 20 years, the people at the NSA, the NRO, the NGA, the CIA, the new CIA, and other intelligence organizations, which blew this operation apart over the past 10 to 20 years, because in their NSA sweep of our telephones, or the metadata as they called it, they had picked up Israeli compromises all over the United States and in the world. What we have now is a real problem with Israel. And Israel has been placed on notice because our ambassador, the Jewish ambassador there, as well as Kushner, have made a very clear statement. Israel, you're on notice. If you do not make a peace treaty with the Palestinians, there will be more serious repercussions than you imagine. The beginning of the takedown of your Mossad operatives, who were all present, and we will put them in prison, is just the beginning of what we can do to the future of Israel. Now, as a Jew, I am not proud what American Jews have done. For the most part, I find them to be arrogant, ignorant, totally devoid of any world culture, totally devoid of understanding what happened to us in the Holocaust, totally devoid of understanding what Israel is really about. And it isn't the sanctimonious state that people think it is, because I was there in the 1980s when they created Hamas. I was there when the generals were terrorizing Palestinians and the Intifada was created. But let me quote to you my rabbi, and it turns out to be a family member, Soloveitchik, who said, in order to be a good Jew or a good human, you have to follow the righteous way and avoid evil. Thank you and good night.
Scott.
Well, it reminds me of a quote Gandhi had said, intolerance of evil is a duty. And it's very simple. I think that's a very good quote. Intolerance of evil is a duty. So we all have a duty, especially those in the military, the intelligence community, the government, the positions of trust that the American people have bequeathed upon them. When we raise our hand and swear that solemn oath to the Constitution to defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic, it does not grant a reprieve to Mr. Acosta to look the other way because, quote, unquote, Epstein is associated or connected with intelligence. There's no reprieve. There is law, there's righteousness, there's the Constitution, and then all violations must be exposed and prosecuted accordingly. So Acosta's comments are idiotic and treasonous, I consider them. I like Pechenik's video. I think it's very good. I agree with it. I think it's right on the money that the Mossad most likely are the key organization that has been running the pedophile honey traps because they have no moral character. They have no spiritual, eternal sense of existence. They live for the consumption of material things on this earth and the subjugation of non-Jewish goyim as their chattel. Now, I'm not saying that's all Jews, just like all Catholics or Baptists or Protestants aren't falling into a heretical category, but that certainly represents a lot of the mindset of people in senior positions of the Israeli government and the Mossad and these legal positions that we've seen for the last, since 1948. So that ideology facilitates a behavioral pattern where there's absolute merciless disgust. It's very similar to the Chinese, incidentally. A two-dimensional robotic cult mentality of the Chinese is what enables them to do the most hideous forms of human experimentation and organ harvesting and slave labor camps. So you get a pair of Nikes for $20 because you got slaves making them, and they just kill them and discard them like firewood afterwards. That's the moral disintegration that's happened since 1973, I'd say. But I'm focusing on one part on Acosta. The Mossad is correct. The honey traps are correct. The methodology of using a child is the most powerful intelligence weapon you could use to entrap someone, because the narcissistic personality that is driven by lust and the satisfaction of the flesh and pleasures, and especially the sexual gratification and the depths of sexual debauchery that can animate certain narcissistic sociopathic personalities like Bill Clinton, like Hillary Clinton, they are consumed. It's like catnip to them, right? Little girls in bikinis and all that, or little boys and transgender, it's like catnip to them. They can't resist. The Mossad understand that. They use that. They manipulate that. They lose their soul in the process, and of course they will have their reward. But this needs to, of course, come out. Don't be surprised, Jim, if there is widespread shutting down of YouTube and Facebook channels of people who are discussing this and exposing this as this fire builds. But I'll say this, and Don, you're the only one that's going to have this on the show. No one else has talked about this.
Right.
But Acosta, R. Alexander Acosta, he was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida. In 2005, Acosta was the U.S. Southern District Attorney of Florida, and he prosecuted people like Jack Abramoff, the terrorism suspect Jose Padilla, and others. But one of the other things he did was he prosecuted Brad Birkenfeld in the Union Bank of Switzerland case, which had been brought by Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer and Hillary Clinton at the Department of State, at the Department of Justice in Washington in 2008, 2009. So Jim Acosta was responsible for the prosecution of Brad Birkenfeld, the confiscation of 19,000 bank accounts that Brad Birkenfeld had brought over from Switzerland. He is responsible for the coordination of the intelligence between the CIA and the Department of Justice. CIA had assigned Edward Snowden to be Brad Birkenfeld's agent, if you will, his operative. And they had gotten Brad into a DUI situation in Switzerland. The next day, the CIA flashed a badge and said, you work for us, you come with us, come out and debrief us. Well, Brad didn't want to do that. He fled to the United States with all of his bank account information, but he spurned the CIA, and Edward Snowden described that. Edward Snowden knew Brad Birkenfeld. That's part of the reason he left the country. He also knew me from Booz Allen Hamilton. So these interesting connections are there. They can't be denied. They can't be covered up. They're there in paper. You can see them in the Bureau of Prisons history. Brad Birkenfeld, Scott Bennett, same jail, 6 months debriefing, and then the report goes out to Eric Holt, to General Flynn, to General Mattis, to General Ray Odierno, Secretary of the Army, and up the Armed Services Committees of the Senate and the House, and Senator Feinstein of the Intelligence Committee. That's why the CIA started listening to Feinstein. That's why Michael Isikoff and Tom Hamburger came and met with me in 2013, all about Birkenfeld and Snowden. Isikoff is a CIA asset, so is Tom Hamburger. So this lotus flower is getting bigger and it's blossoming. But Acosta, R. Alexander Acosta, was one of the prosecuting attorneys, along with Kevin Downing and Kevin O'Connor at the Department of Justice, as well as Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer and Loretta Lynch. They all prosecuted Union Bank of Switzerland, Brad Birkenfeld, to get the 19,000 bank accounts, to use them for black budget operations between Hillary Clinton, the Department of Justice, and Syria and Libya and these other places are the result. And Acosta failed to use any of this intelligence and gave it to the military. None of this intelligence was shared with the United States military and the terrorist financing because they didn't want us to shut it down, Jim. That's what I was doing at Central Command. I was the Tasmanian devil looking for a China shop to upset. And they didn't like it. They pulled me out faster than you could imagine. They knew I wasn't playing ball. They knew I was there to pick a fight and destroy some brigands. And ironically, white hat, God inspired, Brad and I got together and talked and debriefed and got all this information. It ties back to Giuliani. It ties back to New York. Abdullah Aziz, one of the major financiers, was connected to Giuliani. Brad brought all of that out. And all of his WikiLeaks cables that Julian Assange had transferred to Brad Birkenfeld about State Department cables involving the UBS deal, that too exonerates Julian Assange. That too invites him to come and testify about this matter. So Acosta needs to be investigated about his role in the terrorist financing shell game of the Union Bank of Switzerland case, because it was the first Uranium One deal. It was the first scam that Hillary Clinton and Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer and Barack Obama did. They did it with Robert Wolf, chairman of the Americas, who now works on the Obama Library. So Robert Wolf, who pops up on Fox News, is not a good guy. He's a criminal. So yeah. Robert Wolf, who was Brad Birkenfeld's boss, all of these people need to be brought in and interrogated and examined, because what Acosta did was part of this larger conspiracy of the shell game with Swiss banks and financing terrorism, the pay-to-play that fed in with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Trump has this information, and other people do too. And this is the time to bring it all together. But that's one of the reasons I think Acosta was fired, was because all of the other information, and UBS in this case is I think the greatest example of his crime. Go ahead.
That was simply splendid, Scott. I do think that between Steve Pachinik's report and the one we had from the defense attorney of our last show, where the defense attorney said when he distributed subpoenas far and wide, the only one who was responsive was Donald Trump. He said, come on in, let's talk, I'll tell you all I know. He said what Trump had to say panned out, it was accurate information, and that he'd been very valuable, very helpful. And now with Pachinik saying that the White House is taking a lead here in snaring this vast network on pedophile cases rather than pursuing spying, because they're spying using pedophilia as a method, is brilliant, and it makes Donald Trump look like the knight on a white horse. I'm very, very impressed, Scott, with the way this is playing out.
Yeah. Can I add a word or two here? I'll say that all the Scott Bennett stuff is in this book here about shell game that was written where, Scott, was this written in prison? Or because you were blowing a whistle on a deep...
It was written on a prison typewriter, so I wanted people to experience the drama of the cold cement walls and the Nazi Gestapo whistle and the barking German shepherds. Well, it wasn't that bad, but...
Yeah, but also, can I add a little thing here? I want you guys to tell me that I'm wrong. I'm going to read a little 4 lines here, and you tell me that I'm wrong, okay? This U.S. system is not designed to root out evil. It is designed to obscure and perpetuate evil. The most egregious criminals are rarely ever touched by scandal or jail time because they stand in key positions within our system. Like strands of a malignant cancer, these people are wrapped around every facet of government. The system, as it stands today, is a corruption machine that manufactures evil, and the false hopes can breed crippling apathy. Hopefully I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
Whose quote is that?
That comes from Ludwig van Mises out of there. So it's quite a good thing here. So Am I wrong with that?
Well, I never surrender my government or my political halls to the evil, because we as a people in the American Republic democracy, we deserve and choose the leaders we get. Yes, there's a lot of corrupt money and things like that, but you know what? If you have people in the streets, if you have the churches in this country being what they're supposed to be and talking about these political social issues, if you had some real alpha males in the church and not a bunch of effeminate beta males who've been self-castrated and just want to live in peace when there is no peace, you'd have a more dynamic, uncompromising America. And you'd have, in that dynamism and uncompromising attitude, you'd have the righteous fury of limiting government, restraining ourselves. Like Adam said, America is only suitable for a moral and religious people. We've lost our morality and our religiosity by transplanting it into the sterility robot of government. And look no further than the welfare state. There should be no government welfare state, period. It is a community, family, human to human enterprise and relationship. And only there, all welfare is local. It is not federally organized or managed. And we've lost that since the 1930s and 40s under Roosevelt. And I hope and pray it sort of comes back in a smaller way. But we can never allow, you know, as Edmund Burke said, the only thing needed for evil to prosper is for good men to do nothing. And these people on Capitol Hill who are ranting and raving, and the Democrats and Nadler and Ocasio-Cortez and these other half-wits that are up there saying everything's bad about America, it's racist, that, and reparations for black people, and I want free college and free open borders and tuition. That's a gift, as Trump said. That's a gift. The Green New Deal, that's a gift to Trump, because most Americans are center-right, the majority of Americans, and they look to that with loathing and disgust and outrage, and they will vote against that, which means they'll vote for Trump. Now, if he's dumb enough to start a war with Iran, if he's dumb enough to get in a pissing fight with Ocasio-Cortez and women of color, he's going to seem like he's less of a man, and that could cost him. Remember, the election is determined by the very small electorate in the middle that vote according to their feelings. So political communication and communicating to the masses in America is a very delicate thing. But Trump's got to be wary and restrain himself and really focus on being a Rex Harrison, David Niven diplomat. I know that may be a stretch, but as far as he can get to those sort of Cary Grant, debonair, soft-spoken ways, it will go a long way to help him. Jim?
Wonderful, wonderful, Scott.
Okay. Thank you.
Meanwhile, we have Bolton demanding Iran abandon a non-existent nuclear arms program. This is embarrassingly bad. U.S. officials are continuing to express demands Iran get rid of its nuclear weapons program, a long-standing demand. Iran is well aware of it. The problem is Iran doesn't have such a program, has repeatedly disavowed ever having such a program. We repeated before many times, our own intel agencies already in 2007 concluded Iran was not pursuing nuclear weapons, a conclusion they reaffirmed in 2011. Even the Mossad came on board in 2012 and agreed Iran was not pursuing nuclear weapons 3 weeks before Bibi went to the UN and asserted precisely the opposite. Where is this coming from? Meanwhile, a leaked UK memo says Trump axed the Iran deal despite Obama. This is very distressing. A UK newspaper published more leaked memos from Britain's ambassador in Washington on Sunday, despite a police warning that doing so might be a crime. In one 2018 cable published by the Mail Sunday, UK Ambassador Kim Darroch said President Trump pulled out of an international nuclear deal with Iran as an act of diplomatic vandalism to spite his predecessor, Barack Obama. The memo, written after then Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson visited Washington in a failed attempt to persuade the U.S. not to abandon the Iran deal. But this is very, very upsetting if that is in fact the case. And I really could never see a suitable rationale for it other than pressure from Israel, which wants to exacerbate relations. Here's a fascinating study why a major conventional war with Iran is an impossibility. coming from global research. Under present conditions, an Iraq-style all-out blitzkrieg involving the simultaneous deployment of ground, air, and naval forces against Iran is an impossibility. For several reasons, U.S. hegemony in the Middle East has been weakened largely as a result of the evolving structure of military alliances. The U.S. does not have the ability to carry out such a project. There are two main factors. First, Iran's military. Iran's military capabilities, ground forces, Navy, Air Force, missile defense, to effectively resist and respond to an all-out conventional war involving the deployment of U.S. and allied forces, has sizable military capabilities, is acquiring Russia's S-400 state-of-the-art air defense system. Iran is ranked as a major military power in the Middle East with an estimated 534,000 active personnel in the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Islamic Revolutionary Guard. It has advanced ballistic missile capabilities as well as a national defense industry. In the case of a U.S. air attack, Iran would target U.S. military facilities in the Persian Gulf. Evolving structure. The second consideration has to do with the evolving structure of military alliances from 2003 to 2019, largely to the detriment of the United States. Several of America's staunchest allies are now sleeping with the enemy. Countries with borders with Iran include Turkey and Pakistan, have military cooperation agreements with Iran. While this itself excludes the possibility of a ground war, it also affects the planning of U.S. and allied naval and air operations. Until recently, both Turkey and NATO heavyweight and Pakistan were among America's faithful allies, hosting U.S. military bases. From a broader military standpoint, however, Turkey is actively cooperating now with both Iran and Russia. Moreover, Ankara will also acquire in 2020 Russia's state-of-the-art S-400 air defense system, while de facto opting out from the integrated U.S.-NATO-Israeli defense system. Needless to say, the North American Treaty Organization is in crisis. Turkey's exit from NATO is almost de facto. America can no longer rely on its staunchest allies. U.S. and Turkey-supported militia are fighting one another in Syria. Iraq has also indicated it will not cooperate with the U.S. in case of a ground war against Iran. Under present condition, none of Iran's neighboring states, including Turkey, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, would allow U.S. allied ground forces to transit through their territory. In recent developments, Azerbaijan, which in the wake of the Cold War became a U.S. ally, as well as a member of NATO's partnership, has changed sides. Earlier U.S.-Azeri military cooperation agreements are virtually defunct, including the post-Soviet Guam military alliance between Georgia, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, and Moldova. Bilateral military and intel agreements between Iran and Azerbaijan were signed in December 2018. In turn, Iran collaborates extensively with Turkmenistan. With regard to Afghanistan, the internal situation with the Taliban controlling a large part of Afghan territory would not favor a large-scale deployment of U.S. and allied ground forces on the Iran-Afghan border. Visibly, the policy of strategic encirclement against Iran formulated in the wake of the Iraq War of 2003 is no longer functional. Iran has friendly relations with neighboring countries which previously were part of the U.S. sphere of influence. Under these conditions, a major conventional theater war by the U.S. involving the deployment of ground forces would be suicide. This does not mean, however, that war will not take place. In some regard, with the advances in military technology, an Iraq-style war is obsolete. We are nonetheless at a dangerous crossroads. Other diabolical forms of military intervention directed against Iran are currently on the drawing boards in the Pentagon, which include various forms of limited warfare, for example, targeted missile attacks, U.S. and allied support of terrorist paramilitary groups, so-called bloody nose operations, including the use of tactical nukes, acts of political destabilization and color revolutions, false flag attacks and military threats, sabotage, confiscation of financial assets, extensive economic sanctions, electromagnetic and climatic warfare, environmental modification techniques, cyber warfare, chemical and biological warfare. Another consideration is the crisis with the U.S. command structure. It extends for broader Middle East operations extending from Afghanistan to North Africa. Most important combat command is located in Qatar. In the case of a war with Iran, operations in the Middle East would be coordinated by the U.S. Central Command in Tampa, but permanent liaison with its forward command headquarters in Qatar. In late June 2019, after Iran shot down a U.S. drone, President Trump called off the swiftly planned military strikes on Iran while intimating in his tweet that any attack by Iran or anything American would be met with great and overwhelming force. The U.S. Central Command confirmed the deployment of the U.S. Air Force F-22 stealth fighters in Qatar intended to defend American forces and interests in the region against Iran. But the base is technically Qatari property, playing host to the forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command. With 11,000 U.S. personnel, it's described as one of the U.S. military's most enduring, most strategically positioned operations on the planet. What both fail to acknowledge is U.S. CENTCOM's forward Middle East headquarters it lies within enemy territory. Since May of 2017, split of the Gulf Cooperation Council, Qatar has become a staunch ally of both Iran and Turkey, which is also an ally of Iran. While they have no official military cooperation agreement with Iran, they share a joint ownership with Iran, the largest worldwide maritime gas fields, see below. So how on earth can you have a war on Iran from the territory of a close ally of Iran? From a strategic point of view, it does not make sense, and this is but the tip of an iceberg. Notwithstanding the rhetoric underlying the U.S.-Qatar military relationship, the Atlantic Council, a think tank with close ties to both the Pentagon and NATO, confirms that Qatar is now a firm ally of both Turkey and Iran. What this means is that while Qatar hosts UN CENTCOM's forward headquarters, Iran and Qatar are unofficially collaborating in the area of security, intelligence, and military. Sloppy military planning, sloppy U.S. foreign policy, sloppy intelligence. Trump statements confirm they're planning to launch the war against Iran from their forward U.S. CENTCOM headquarters at a military base located in enemy territory. Is it rhetoric or sheer stupidity? I've got to say, it's a devastating situation we confront. Scott.
Yeah, one quick minute. You'll go ahead.
Well, I think it would absolutely be foolish to go into a limited or major conflict with Iran. And the problem is it's all fun and games for military planners because it's all gamesmanship to them. They're not understanding that everything stops when there's an electrical power grid in Idaho going out.
Hold that thought, Scott. We'll return after the break. Don.
Yeah, we'll have a little break here with Truth versus News here on July 15th. We're really covering a lot of stuff. A lot of dirt is being dug up, and I'm afraid it needs to be sorted out and thrown out and disposed of. So we're going to be right back here and about another, well, stay tuned for the second half of the show. I've seen what's going on there. It's really a great show today. So come on back here in a few minutes.